Line at 560theanswer.com.
This hourly segment is brought to you by Health Quest Radio with Dr. David Kolbaba. Saturday mornings at 11. Visit healthquestradio.com.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Morning. Welcome back to Chicago's Morning Answer. Amy Jacobson here, Jim Uriel, in for Dan Croft once again. Thank you very much. On your 60th birthday week.
It is my 60th birthday week. Big party tomorrow night.
Yeah, where are we going?
Well, we're just having it in our backyard. Just you've met the Uriel family, so just if you just have family, it's a big party. So it's like, a normal Thanksgiving for us is 40 people. So when we say we're having 70 people, it's not that unusual.
70 people.
Yeah, we're a lot of people.
Find 70 people.
Yeah.
To hang out with. Oh, okay. So we found the rap song that the one congressman from Tennessee wants Zerari kicked out of the country for. Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay.
Down for you. Put the ground for you. Put the sign for you. Give a crown to you. Down for you.
This is a sardonic one.
It definitely seems like a devil worshiper thing. Like on those crime shows when someone's in their basement and they have blood all over their walls.
Wait.
You talking retention. Me, I'm talking expansion. Got the whole squad, yeah, keep them at attention. And I'm not in the business of taking no tension. So, gather round now, celebrate me. I'm your boss, I'm your honey. Got a doctorate, bitch, so don't try me. Don't need a nano, cause I'm living my G. Kitty, my G. Run this whole city like a
Okay, I don't see what's offensive in that, do you?
No, well, except for it sounds awful. I mean, is that offensive enough? For me, it is.
It's bad.
Yeah, it was bad. I didn't like that. It's like, those guys, in Criminal Minds, like you go to someone's basement and he's got pentagrams written in blood on his wall. That's the music they're playing in my mind.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, with more on this recent election victory for him and more matters economic, let's welcome to the program Charles Payne. I do believe this might be your first time here in this year, correct?
So it's great to be here.
Yeah. So how's New York reacting to this victory?
There's two sets of stories out there, and I think people have to be very careful because Fox is running with this sort of the day after the Dems are outraged. The day after the Dems were not outraged. The Democratic voters who just pulled the lever for this guy were ecstatic. The Democratic establishment might have been outraged. And so there's two distinct things. We have to stop reporting news about how it affects a handful of elites as being representative of everyone. And that's why a guy like this gets elected.
So, Charles, they're talking about brother. Thanks so much for being on. I love Charles Payne.
No problem, Jim. Love you, man.
Yeah, I love you too. So, the notion of deporting him for song lyrics. Every time people start talking about that, it's absurd. Now that this has happened, I know this is your city. So this may be a hard question for you to answer. But people like us who believe in conservative principles, particularly fiscally, in some ways, I want to see it. You have at it. And keep in mind that in my cities, the same thing's happening too. Fail again, and then what's going to happen after that? But then I worry that we're going to bail them out. Any thoughts on that?
Well, you have to be careful about failure because in my mind, these folks have, not only that, they failed for the last 60 years.
Yeah.
And they still get reelected, right? Failure depends on who they pin it on. We failed, but these folks held us back. Give us a bigger mandate. Give us more votes. And it's worked. Listen, Lyndon Johnson made the stroll through Appalachia, and we had the Great Society, and everything was going to be right, but everything went wrong.
No doubt about it.
Every city that embraced this is sort of like every country that embraced communism or socialism paid a heavy price, and it just doesn't go away overnight. So also, I'm worried about the people, right? I mean, who have to suffer through this, young ideological folks. What's really crazy, though, is the nuance of this election, though, Jim. So this guy won. He got 62% of the white college vote.
Yeah.
think about that for a moment. I mean, what are they? And by the way, this is a reflection of indoctrination that goes back now. It begins in schools, right? There's a lot of these socialist clubs in these high schools. We've been talking about it for at least 15 years, but it begins almost from the first day they walk into public school, particularly in large cities. And this is the outcome of that. Even someone who's quote unquote educated, who should understand history and where these things go to, where they ultimately could lead, still have embraced this thing.
Yeah.
And so there's another lesson too. Cuomo ran a terrible campaign.
He did.
And it's just like the guy who ran against AOC, who at the time was the number 2 or 3 Democrat in the entire country. He barely visited his district. You can't take people for granted. Also, that's another moral, one of the morals of this story.
Yeah.
And what are the chances that Eric Adams will prevail in this general election in November?
I'm not sure. On the betting odds, he went from practically 0 to 24%. He's certainly re-energized. He was all over the place yesterday. What was amazing to me is that the commercials they were running said that this guy was anti-police, that he wanted to cut the law enforcement budget.
Oh, yeah.
And he still won his primary. Yeah, I know. I'm just saying. But so if voters wouldn't pull the lever on that, sometimes people also take things for granted, when you don't know how bad they can get too, right? I mean, especially in New York City and crime.
Right.
All you need is one major economic downturn. But
Sure.
New York City has been somewhat impervious. We just set a new record for rents.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you more about it because the voting pattern of the minority and the lower class community versus what you said about the more wealthy, I think is unbelievable. And I'm going to get back to it in 1 second, but I do want to mention your new book, The Unbreakable Investor, and ask you one quick question about that. Okay, just judging from the title, The Unbreakable Investor, it seems like there's a novel reading into that, meaning you think that the average guy is chasing money. You want to set up a portfolio that works in downturns. Is that your motivation for writing the book?
Well, the biggest motivation is to be invested. I want people invested in the stock market, first and foremost. And I want people invested in a way. I start my very first chapter. I talk about my grandparents in Alabama in 1952 who bought a farm. And where they bought a farm, I mean, we're talking about where lynchings were still happening, the pain and agony they went through, what they saved up for it. When I finally got a copy of the contract, I've been searching for years for it. One cousin finally had it. I cried for days. They gave up everything they had to own this land, everything. They had the names of the mules. One mule was named Red, and they gave it all up just to have that land. And then my grandfather had to go into forests or woods, cut down trees to make axe handles and get old axes, find them and resharpen them. But they had land. They owned something, right?
Yeah.
So that was the foundation. It's not about getting rich. It's about building the foundation for the next generation.
Amen.
And that's the way I want people to look at this.
I love that. I'm going to read it as soon as I can. And that's amazing. And I appreciate you writing that so much.
I love that story. And what about your grandparents? What did they farm down there? What was their crop?
Oh, they had everything. I got to tell you, I used to go down there. Oh my God! I mean, they had okra. They had some chickens, cows. But you see the old pictures of the mule with the plow. And the guys behind the plow. Mm-hmm. I remember going down. I used to hate going down there, but I remember as a kid, I thought the mule did all the work. Man, I was exhausted. I did one row just holding that plow perpendicular. So I used to wrestle my cousins, right? They were so strong. They used to twist me up in a pretzel.
Maybe that's what I should have done. You grew up to be a big, strong man, and I'm just this tiny little guy. I should have maybe been behind a mule a little bit more as a kid. That made it work.
Well, how did you become an investor? How did you get? Just tell us how that happened.
I had two childhoods. Okay. The first childhood, my father was in the Army, and we moved every year. We lived all over the world. I lived in Japan. I lived in Germany. I was born in New York. Went to Pittsburgh, San Antonio, back to Pittsburgh, back to Texas, Alabama, North Carolina, Virginia. In fact, we had a different school every year, but I loved it, And the last base we lived on was Fort Lee, Virginia. So we had a 2-story house. Never locked the doors, played all day long. Just, you went out, it was just idyllic life. I don't remember even locking the doors. And I came home from school one day and my mom said, we're leaving. So, my parents had problems, and so it was me, my mom, and my 2 younger brothers. That evening, we got on a bus, with no money, and we went from Fort Lee, Virginia, Army base, 2-story house. Never knew about crime, never knew about poverty. And all 4 of us went to Harlem that day to a childhood friend of hers. And all 4 of us lived in a room. And I immediately learned about, I learned that there were so many things. First, the energy of New York was amazing. It was so powerful. But then also I learned about the other part of it, the crime and poverty I never knew existed. And so we lived with this woman for about 2 months. We got our own apartment, but that first winter we had no heat or hot water. So I was the oldest, and I never thought about money a single day in my life. And now here I am. I've got to help my mom. So, my first thing I did was I would clean windows at stoplights with, I bought a thing of paper towel and some Windex, and I would clean windshields at stoplights and red lights and stop signs. I eventually got a job at a bodega. So I'm saying, golly, how can I help my mother? And I think everyone at some point equates wealth with Wall Street. And so I started reading the Wall Street Journal, or at least I tried to. This is in the 70s, right? So it was all lines and numbers. It was so hard to understand this thing, but I started to eventually pick it up. And so when I was 14 years old, I told my mother, I'm going to work on Wall Street. And I bought my first mutual fund when I was 17 with the money I earned from all my hustling, and she had to co-sign. I joined the Air Force, and at 18, I bought my first stock.
Wow.
So
what was your first
when I got
stock?
out of the Air Force, MCI. And let me tell you why MCI. MCI was started by,
No, it's bringing me back to old times. MCI, yes.
MCI. So the guy who started it, right, initially, this guy was a maverick, right? He took on the greatest company in the world. He was taking on AT&T, which at that point was the biggest company that ever existed. This maverick startup, piggybacking off TV antennas, is going to take on this giant. I love a David and Goliath story. And the stock did well. On top of that, it did really well. Later on, it became involved in some kind of crazy stuff. But initially, you had this guy who would smoke like 10 packs of cigarettes a day, and all he wanted to do was win. And those are the kind of people that I love, right? So, and not the cigarette per se, but the determination part. And so, so I was hooked. When I bought my first stock, and I saved up $1,000, went to the Dean Witter office in Minot, North Dakota, because that was my first base out after basic training. And I've got the stock. I asked for the stock certificate, and I put it in a metal box, and that was it. I was off and running after that.
That's awesome. Tell me this. Okay, so you've been at Fox, your show, Making Money with Charles Payne, which is a great show. Of the people who come on there, and you have the luxury of just listening and interviewing some of the greatest minds in finance, and not just about trading, but about investing and portfolio construction. Who are some of the names of people you've listened to, let's say over the last 10 years, and have gone, wow, that person really knows what they're doing? I am not fishing for Jim Uriel to be the answer to this question. Let's rule out Jim Uriel, but who besides that?
Phil Blancano, Jim Bianco. On the Federal Reserve side, I bring Danielle DiMartino Booth on a lot. Gabrielle Santos. I mean, really, honestly, the list is pretty long.
No, I know it is. And Jim Bianco's a friend. Yeah. Danielle is a friend. I love those guys.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. They're my go-to people as well. And I do think.
You know what my thing is when I talk to my bookers, and this is the hard part because they get pitched a lot, right? My thing is, first and foremost, I've got a 3-page outline of what I consider to be the ideal candidate. And first and foremost is I like people who write. Who write their own research. People send in what we call POVs, point of views. I don't care about your point of view. Like I said, I don't care if you're bullish. The guy who drove me into the office today was bullish or bearish. Yeah. I want to see the work. Remember when we were in school, you had to see the work?
Yep.
So that's what I love. I want to see people who do the work. I also want to have people who, when they're wrong, the phone rings. So I don't have a lot of analysts. I don't have the guy working on the 33rd floor. And he was late to put a buy recommendation on Palantir, or because no one knows who he is, right? I want people that are so accountable that this means something a little different to them.
I love that. That's great. And so it seems like the tone of the book and the parts that I've read, it seems like you think that people make a lot of mistakes, particularly young people. What are some common mistakes that if you could just teach the young group of investors to avoid that you think that would be a better investing life for them?
The first mistake is not being in the market.
Okay.
That's the first mistake. And, I tell people a lot, and especially when I bump into people in the street, and, people stop me every day, and a lot of them say, "Oh, man, I love you, but I'm not in the market." So I look at what they're wearing, and they'll have on, they'll have a bunch of stuff on. And I'm like, "Well, when did you buy that hat?" So. Did you tell anybody about it? Yeah, I loved it. I said, okay, so, you bought a product with your hard-earned money. You told 5 or 10 family members that bought it, friends to buy it. So you mean to tell me you put in your hard-earned money and you became an unpaid spokesperson for this company, but you don't think you should be a part owner?
It's a great point.
That's the first thing, right? And then after that, let's go at this in a way where the other thing I always beat the drums on is you have to make it a lifelong endeavor. The biggest mistake, buying one stock, seeing how it works out, and then deciding, this isn't for me. That's the other. If we can get over those two hurdles, and you're saying, okay, I'm going to commit to making this a lifelong endeavor, we're going to be okay.
Okay. What do you think? Okay, so the big beautiful bill supposedly is going to pass soon. Larry was on the show yesterday, and he assured us that it's going to be passed by the 4th of July. That notwithstanding. So when you look at 2026 and 2027, are you bullish on the U.S. economy? And I know the answer to this. You're always going to be bullish on the U.S. economy, right?
I'm bullish. It's what, going to be a 27, 29, $30 trillion economy. I'm bullish on I'm always bullish on the economy in that sense, right? And I'm always bullish on the idea that within that framework, there are going to be companies that do extremely well. They're going to do exceedingly well. I am concerned about a lot of things, and the Federal Reserve is a big topic these days. I think we have to blow it up. It's not about the next Fed chair. It's about their mandate, their mission. And think about this: when they hike rates and they're restrictive, what just happened that we just saw that's just been mind-boggling?
Yeah.
The move into money markets, $7 trillion. Right now, Jay Powell's got the biggest cash position he's ever had. He's approaching $400 billion in cash. Well, how can he do that? He's making so much money just on interest.
Right.
So when they hike rates and they get restrictive, guess what? Rich folks just have these money markets, and they don't feel the pain. So now you got 10% of the Americans buying 50% or more of the products. Mm-hmm. So then when they cut rates, it juices the asset prices. So rich folks don't feel the pain. Yeah. And so what are they doing? They're not moderating society. They're moderating Main Street. And the thing about the Fed is, think about how often they talk about wages. Why are you upset if middle-class folks are getting a raise? Why do you have to spring into action and slow that down?
People don't get that. Yeah, they slow down wage growth because they don't want wage growth. Right. I agree 100%. I think the Fed has been a mistake. I think we could automate 20 different economic signals to have very, very small movements in rates and do much, much better. Sorry, I know we're going over time. Amy, you take it back.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you two questions. President Trump, he wanted to get rid of the debt ceiling. Do you think that's a good idea?
Absolutely. It's been hiked, 66, 72 times in 50 years. It's a ploy. What happens is then people get to hold it hostage. When they hold it hostage, they get to bring in bridges to nowhere. It's been an absolute failure. If it was a debt ceiling, it would be a debt ceiling, but it's not. It's a negotiating tool that allows us to put in all kinds of crap that we want to get out, unnecessary things.
Now, you mentioned real quick about you're the older brother. You have two younger brothers, and I know that is your younger brother still in jail?
Oh boy, you don't even want to know.
Well, because you motivated me, because I have a foster son, and he was in jail, and I heard you once say that you put money in his commissary every week, and then I thought, you know what, I'm going to do that too, because Charles Payne is doing that.
Well, you know what? It makes him, it makes him feel like something. He told me 99% of the guys in there don't have anyone in their family that can even send him $5. So for him to get the $100 max each week, and he's always been a nice guy in terms of, he's got a drug problem. He's not a criminal per se. He's a drug addict. And so he gets the money, he shares it, he sent me the receipt. He buys the hard candy, the coffee. Also, they buy this food that some of the old timers know how to cook up. So everyone's smelling the aroma. it's but it gives him a little bit, makes him endure the better. But for me, I hate to say it, but when he's in there, I sleep better at night.
Wow.
A couple of years ago, my aunt called me and said, "Listen, your brother was just at the house and he didn't have on any shoes." This was in January.
Oh.
She says, "I think he's going to die if he doesn't. He looks sick." And then 2 days later, he was arrested, and I had a sigh of relief. And so, it's in the jail that he goes to. He's not in prison. They put him in this jail, and they don't really have a lot of drug trafficking because it's not a big place like that. So I hate to say it, but when he's in there, I sleep better.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
I'll keep him in my prayers, and thank you so much. The new book is The Unbreakable Investor. Charles Payne, you can find him on X at CV Payne, Payne. I'm sure everybody knows how to spell it. Everybody knows who you are. And really, you're the host of Making Money weekdays at 1 p.m. Central Time on Fox Business. And just a pleasure to have you on the program. I hope to have you back soon.
Thanks, Amy. I'll definitely come back soon.
Okay. Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.
Is it time to get your children and grandchildren out of the godless government schools? You cannot allow your loved ones to be forcibly subjected to ungodly psychological examinations and perverse sexual teachings. You would not send your child to a school that teaches 2 + 2 is 5. What is being taught today is far worse and damaging to minds and hearts. We can help through our on-campus Christian